Welcome to Calcio FC, your weekly dose of all things Italian football and culture. This week we dive deep on Pippo Inzaghi and Pisa. We talk about the comings and goings of the transfer market, and we get your views on our social media channels. But first, there's only really one place to start this week, and that is with the Derby della Madonnina, guys, the Milan Derby. And as ever, joining me, David Ferrini, the Destination Calcio writers, Emmet Gates and Dan Cancian, here back in London, been to Milan on the weekend. What a buzz, guys. Take me through it. Emmet.
David, a fantastic experience from start to finish. We were only in Milan for 2 days, but yeah, going to the Derby, our second of the season, that was fantastic. You know, the atmosphere never fails. It was a good game, and just to be in and around the city, feel the buzz, see the red and black and the blue and black jerseys and scarves all around the city. It was fantastic.
Yeah, we went to the supporter shops as well, the fan shops where you can buy the shirts, and they were packed. There was a lineup outside the Milan one. Of course, it was a Milan home game, Inter the away side, but they somehow got over the line. They brought it back at the death, and I guess that adds to the experience, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, my ears have just about stopped ringing now. The noise was deafening, wasn't it? I second everything Emma said. You know, it was a fantastic atmosphere. To me, it's still the standout fixture in Serie A. I know Milan are not what they used to be, but you can't beat it, you know. Inter and Milan going at each other, 75,000 at San Siro. The atmosphere was electric, febrile, whichever way you want to describe it. It is, as I said on our podcast on Sunday, it's like bucket list stuff. You know, you got to be there to experience it at least once if you love football.
Yeah, we recorded outside the stadium. For those of you who haven't seen that, go and see the explosive Milan Derby. Everything you need to know, that is up on YouTube right now. Across our socials, we've got other things from the game in the lead up to it, and then post, of course. It was Kyle Walker's debut. Big day for him. He's been there and done it before. Big player for the big occasion. We've seen him captain the FA Cup final at Wembley for Manchester City. We've seen him play in 2 Euros finals. What did you think of his performance overall? I thought it was no frills. Didn't do much wrong.
Yeah, I think he was defensively solid. I remember at one point he shepherded the ball out, and that got a huge roar from the crowd, and several of the Milan players went over and kind of like chest pumped them to kind of keep him focused. So it was nothing flashy. It was by the numbers, but I think he will add defensive solidity to Milan's defence, and he's definitely an upgrade on Emerson Royal.
Yeah, well, big pectorals there to body pump to. So, Dan, what do you think?
No, I mean, I agree. I think the biggest compliment you can pay Walker is the fact that he was on the pitch for the whole 90 minutes, and Federico Di Marco, who was his direct rival on that flank, came off with 15 minutes left to play.
Did he nullify him, do you think?
Maybe did not nullify him, but he certainly kept him on a leash for a large portion of the game. I mean, Di Marco is arguably the best fullback in Italy and probably in European football.
Yeah.
And after the Walker was very impressive. As Emmet said, not flashy, but then again, you don't really need to be flashy, and Milan can't afford to be flashy because they are by far, second best to Inter Milan. I thought it was interesting, actually, how in the second half, when he was on the touchline closer to dugouts, he spoke a lot to Conceição, and you could see the Conceição was sort of like using his, field general, for wanting a better word, on the pitch. And I think that's going to be key for Walker and Milan. Walker is 34. As you said, he's won 15 major trophies in his career. He's got leadership. This Milan side don't have that leadership. And
he does, and he spoke about that at Casa Milan when he was unveiled by Zlatan.
Yeah.
And that's the benefit of being in the media stand. You can actually see those interactions between players and coach, and you can watch them pacing up and down the touchlines and all the drama, and we can hear all the complaints from the crowd, and I guess some encouragement coming out of the crowd depending on what the scoreline is. Milan home game, though, and Conceição, this is his first derby on home soil. He won in Saudi Arabia. What a comeback win that was. Tammy Abraham knocking in the winner for the Italian Supercoppa. Look, Inter failing to beat Milan this season, and that is because of Stefan de Vrij's late equaliser. Look, that's something in the bag for Milan, and it could be that the tables have turned a little bit, at least in terms of that psyche when you come in against a side like Inter, arguably the best side in Europe. It depends on who they play on their day. Maybe Liverpool, maybe Arsenal, maybe Real Madrid. You just don't know how they're gonna front up. We've seen some of the Italian clubs really push in Champions League and then fall away. We saw Milan against Dinamo Zagreb last week, Fabio Cannavaro's boys, and they weren't able to get over the line. So you just never know what you're going to get from Milan, but you kind of expect a certain level of performance from Inter. They did dominate the game, in my opinion. Milan through Tijani Reinders, beautiful goal from him, one of the standout players for me, along with Yunus Musa. Pulisic, however, was kept out of the game. I guess in that first half, it wasn't played in the wide areas. It was mainly in that central part, and that's what Milan wanted, I think.
Yeah, I think Milan wanted to sort of disrupt Inter's rhythm, and you could see Inter had a good first 5-10 minutes where they were knocking the ball around beautifully, but then they sort of got stopped in their tracks. There was no fluidity to that midfield, and when you had the likes of like Çalhanoğlu, Mkhitaryan, Barella, that is a standout midfield.
Yeah, it's world class.
Yeah, and Milan did really well to stop them. And then in the second half, as I wrote in my piece on Kyle Walker, they were happy to just turn into a scrap because they are Inter at the superior side, and Milan went at it were like, well, to beat us, you're going to need to beat us physically first and foremost. They turned into a scrap, which is what Conceição wanted after Zagreb. He said, well, we can't coach aggression. Aggression, it's either in the players, they either get it or they don't. And they didn't get it in Zagreb, but they certainly got it on Sunday night. I think that the issue for Conceição is not so much about the players. I mean, he doesn't have the quality of players that Inzaghi has at his disposal.
He's got so much depth.
Or even Conte. But I think his mentality is an issue because Fonseca said it himself. These players, it's like they go through a roller coaster every week. And, I mean, you could argue, is that because of the manager? Is it the manager who can't get them to perform every week? But you look across, not just Serie A, across European football, I think there are certain clubs that are like that. You get teams that are so good they're like playing big clubs when they are the underdogs themselves, but they can't turn up week in, week out.
I will mention this one stat. I went back through every game and I couldn't find one time that Inter were down at halftime, and they were with that 45th minute goal by Tijani Reinders. Is he the standout player for Milan?
Yes.
Yeah.
7 goals, leading scorer.
Yeah, exactly. I think of all... So Milan have adapted this Moneyball approach. Dan, we've written about it before, where they buy young talent, nurture them, potentially sell them on. Obviously, we've seen that with Sandro Tonali a couple of summers ago. Tijani Reinders is one of the few that's actually improved since he's arrived. You think of all the players that Milan have signed. Obviously, they signed Alvaro Morata last summer. They've sold him already. They signed Emerson Royal from Tottenham. He was as good as gone until he got injured, and he's out for 2 months, which scuppered his deal. So the Dutchman is one of the few that the approach has worked, and he's actually really improved this season. Last season was his first in Serie A. He needed to add goals to his game. He did that this season. And for me, he's one of the best midfielders in the league now.
Oh, there's no doubts about it. I mean, I think Reinders will be a standout midfielder even in a much better team than the current Milan side.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, you would love to see him playing, not for a better side, but you would love to see Milan being better just to see what he can do in a better side. Yeah.
If you want to read more, go read that on destinationcalcio.com, as well as we've got the San Siro, a couple of pieces up there. Should AC Milan and Inter leave the San Siro? That's up there. That's for debate. Dan, I'll give this question to you. Could you see that being torn down? Because that is a beautiful stadium. Even though it's ancient, it's 100 years old. What do you think?
I mean, football tried its hardest to make us all fall out of love with it. Knocking down the San Siro would be, for me, it's just inconceivable.
Yeah.
It would be like bulldozing, I don't know, Buckingham Palace, or, turning the Statue of Liberty into a McDonald's.
Well, Dan sitting on his soapbox here, I agree with you, Emmet. And I just want to mention that Roberto Baggio on your shirt. He didn't have that many good derbies, did he, Roberto Baggio?
No, he scored a couple for Milan against Inter, but I don't think he ever scored for Inter against Milan.
Encyclopedia of derbies here.
If I may, before we close the segment, we're talking about glories. We should mention that one of the greatest strikers to ever play in the Milan Derby was honoured on Sunday night, Andrei Shevchenko.
Yes, all hail Andre,
inducted
the
in
giant.
Milan Hall of Fame. And, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps now just thinking about the reception he got. The moment he stepped onto the pitch, the entire, Milan curva was chanting his name.
Time stopped. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like being back in the early 2000s.
Time stopped, and we wanted it to rewind.
We
to go
did,
back
yes.
there and
We
have that
absolutely
classic
did.
cultural feel. We'll leave the derby there, the Derby della Madonnina. What a day. We encourage you to go and see our explosive Milan Derby video. Everything you need to know. We talk about even apricot jam croissants, the cornetti with Emmet. We'll leave it there, guys, and we'll move on to the next segment. This is the Calcio FC podcast with me, David Ferrini. I'm joined by Destination Calcio senior writers, Emmet Gates and Dan Cancian in the studio. We're going to talk about the transfer market, a massive one for Italian clubs, unorthodox, I think. Usually no one spends any money in January, but this time, Serie A, Dan, what number were they in Europe for spendage?
They were the third league in terms of spending in Europe behind the Premier League. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise.
And Ligue 1, or as Emmet said off air, probably we should refer to them as PSG because they were the big spenders in France. But yeah, they were Serie A spent. There was a lot of money being thrown about. However, the fact that neither Inter Milan nor Napoli spent big shows you that it was a case of a correction in the market. The clubs who...
Nor Atalanta, if you look at the title contenders, they had a very quiet window.
Hey, tells you everything you need to know about, isn't it? Like, this is very much a case of we got it wrong or we didn't get it right in the summer. Let's try and make amends for it. And Inter Milan don't do that. And as you said, Napoli and Atalanta didn't do that either.
Yeah, they didn't. There were some movers and shakers. We're going to get into those. But first, the big transfer out, shipped off to Manchester United, Dorgu from Lecce. They bought him for, I think it was 220,000 euros. How much did they sell him for? Dan, I'll give this one to you.
30 million euros plus add-ons, which I think is this. I mean, obviously it's a great fee for Lecce, but it's not a bad fee for United either. I mean, he's a young player. He's being reported by The Athletic. He's only going to be on £40,000 a week as a salary, which is a drop in the ocean in the Premier League. Yeah, and he's got great potential. He's very young. He can play a wing back and play a full back. He's even played as a right winger this season for Lecce a couple of times.
I've seen him playing behind the striker.
No, I mean, I think it's probably one of those rare cases where it's a good deal for both parties. Lecce can reinvest that money in the summer, and United have hopefully got themselves a bargain.
Let's go to the focus on the most successful clubs in the transfer window in Serie A. Emmet, you've written a piece. It is on the destinationcalcio.com website, the 9 most eye-catching Serie A transfers, but we're going to try and whittle that down, and we'll let you go and read the rest of the article on the website itself. Look, Milan, Como, Juventus, they're the big spenders. Now, surprise to some that are new to Italian football, Como, the top spender. Emmet, take it away.
Yeah, I think the total expenditure for the window is around just shy of 50 million euros, which is big because considering historically Italian teams don't spend or don't like to spend that much.
And a newly promoted team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In January transfer windows, regardless, but considering the fact that they've just come up, obviously Milan, again, trying to rectify the damage they did last summer, they spent just shy of 50 million also. Yep. Juventus the third with around 30 million. 20. So there was money thrown around, not extravagantly, but still a lot of money for the January transfer window.
Yeah, even the Roman sides, Roma, Lazio, with about 15 million each. Parma, dire straits for them. We'll see how they go the rest of the season. But Fabio Pecchia with 16 million euros in spending, he's gone out. He's brought in a player in that list. We won't talk about the Parma signing. Let's talk about our top signings, in my opinion, your opinion and Dan's opinion. Emmet, give me your first. We'll give you guys 2 each. I'll have 1. Let's go to the top 5.
Okay. I think João Felix de Milan is an interesting one. He's obviously a player that doesn't seem to have a home these days. He's constantly getting bounced around from one team to the next. He wasn't getting much of a look in at Chelsea. And obviously Jorge Mendes has, does what Jorge Mendes does and moves his clients around to find the proper fit. And I think he needs Milan as much as Milan need him, because I think in attack, Milan are a bit, obviously we've seen it at the Derby, if Rafael Leao's not on form, they really don't have a lot going forward. Christian Pulisic has did okay this season, but I think Felix is interesting. You know, it's a 6-month loan. It's a no-risk gamble. If he doesn't do well, return to sender. But I think Felix could add something. You know, he's quick, he's good with the ball. You know, he's not an out-and-out finisher. But obviously, Milan have also tried to rectify that with the signing of Santiago Jimenez. But I think Felix can add something to this Milan team, especially as a maybe like a number 10 attacking midfield role. So yeah, I think there is the possibility that it could work and he actually could finally find a home.
I know that you want to talk about one in particular that Milan also purchased that might just play in front of those two.
Yeah, I mean, I think Santiago Jimenez, as Emmet mentioned, is the sign of the January transfer window. The most expensive player brought in by any Serie A club. And it's
32 million.
Yeah, 32 million,
yep.
plus add-ons. And it's a massive, massive signing for Milan. No, I mean, it's very much a signing based on potential. Jimenez has done really well at Feyenoord, who, of course, are playing Milan in the Champions League. That in itself...
45 goals in 70-something appearances.
Yeah, and that in itself is interesting because Feyenoord have effectively given their best player to the team they'll be playing in the Champions League playoffs.
They're playing them next week.
Yeah.
If someone paid you 32 million, you might do the same.
Going to a rival podcast? I suppose I could. I'll have to chat to my agent about that.
Once we get our Calcio FC actual team and clubhouse ready, we'll let everyone know you can come down and we'll see if maybe Jimenez will do a charity appearance.
Oh, jokes aside, I think it's a statement signing for Milan because let's be honest, their Moneyball approach hasn't worked out so far. Redbird have balanced the books. They are proud of that, as they should, because, you know, being self-sustainable is crucial for clubs these days. But Milan just haven't got a proper striker for years now. They have spent 16 million euros on 11 different strikers since 2020. And of those 16 million, 14 went on Alvaro Morata. And Morata scored 6 goals this season. Has already been shipped off to Galatasaray. And I think we can write that off as a mistake.
So they've just doubled that expenditure on the one. So they're putting all their funds. We should mention Milan, number 1 Italian team in the Deloitte Money League. So they've increased their profits, an extra 13 million in revenue this season.
And I mean, Jimenez works well for them because if he is successful, obviously he can help him on the pitch, but he's still very young. And he's got resale value, at least Milan will hopefully have resale value. And I thought it was telling that Ibrahimovic told reporters yesterday that we did get it wrong in the summer. I mean, not in those words, but he admitted that, you know, the team needed improving. And that's why they weren't shy of going out there and getting him. I just think that, you know, his signing goes to show that the Moneyball approach is all well and good if you balance the books. But ultimately, that doesn't get fans excited. It doesn't win you trophies. And therefore, you know, I mean, yes, it's needed. It's necessary. You know, we see with PSR, we see financial fair play, but you don't lift spreadsheets. You lift trophies, you know. I'm not advocating, like, spending recklessly because we all know what that leads to. But likewise, you've got to give fans something to cheer about. And, you know, Tammy Abraham has scored 2 goals in Serie A this season. Morata, as I said, has scored 6 in all competition. He's already been loaned out. And Milan have nobody else.
They've only got Francesco Camarda, the 16-year-old. I'll throw to you, Emmet, with a question. Just want to mention that Jimenez represents Mexico.
Yeah.
Could have represented Argentina and chose not to.
Yeah,
Started off at Cruz Azul to Feyenoord, now to Milan. Can he replicate what he's doing in the Eredivisie? Don't know if he's going to get as much space, Emmet. So that's what I wanted to throw to you about.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen over the years that strikers that come from the Eredivisie to Serie A, the Premier League, La Liga, there is a massive gap, a jump in quality between that league and, you know, the top 5 major European leagues. So I think the jury is still out on whether he will be a success. Obviously, he needs time because he's not going to get the space, as you alluded to.
Well, with full respect, they've got AZ Alkmaar, Feyenoord, Ajax.
Exactly.
PSV.
Put it this way, if he does as well for Milan as their last signing from Feyenoord, who I believe was John Dahl Thomasson, they'd be more than happy.
There you go. Yes, a blast from the past. He was a great striker.
It was a superb finisher.
Yeah.
In that side with the Sheva back then, Carlo Ancelotti, and
Pippo,
and as the coach.
I mean, he never got much of a look in because the quality of the strikers in front of him. But
it was the fourth striker.
Yeah, exactly.
But he did his job.
And that demonstrated the quality of that Milan team when he was fourth choice.
Yeah.
Now he would be automatic first choice.
Don't get us started on the old Milan team because we'll be here for another hour. I'm going to move on and name mine. I've only got one in this top 5. It's Assane Diao, the Como revelation. He scored 2 goals already, so he's definitely given something in return already. He's only 19, and he's another one of those Spanish wingers that can sort of play centrally, out wide. He's a fast runner. He's kind of what we would think Kyle Walker was years ago, back when he was about that age. Fast, powerful, decisive. He makes a beeline for the goal, but he'll weave you in and out. He's got the step overs. He's got everything. Already scored against Milan, scored against Udinese in that 4-1 win. Superb player coming over from Real Betis, and I think it was 11 million, was it, Emmet? I'm not sure. I'll double check that. 12 million
12
euros.
million.
And I think a standout player for Como. I think he's going to really help them make that impact needed. They've gone in for a few different players. Como, I think they've signed, I think they've turned over half the squad in the January window. So
but you can see that they're going for the sort of like a certain kind of player, a young player, which has a lot of upside, hopefully for them anyway.
Yeah.
Do you think that they're doing this because obviously Nico Paz has been linked with moves to Inter Milan and a few big European clubs are sniffing around?
Well, that's the big club, that overarching mentality. Young player does well at a smaller club, therefore he should belong to one of the big 3. I'm against that. I want them to stay. I love the loyalty like we had in the 70s and 80s back in Serie A, where even Verona could win a Scudetto, or Napoli, because they were rubbish, let's be honest, back in the 80s. Diego came, stayed there, got them trophies. Yeah. That's what we need back in Serie A.
I mean, Como could have spent even more because they put in a bid for Theo Hernandez.
Yeah,
which
40 million.
40 million.
If reports are to be believed.
Yeah, exactly.
Duvakas, another striker that's gone there, the Greek striker. So he's a good one on, I think it was deadline day from Celta Vigo. A few others there. Kakare, we've already seen, we've spoken about Dele Alli already, a couple of pods back. You haven't seen that, go and watch it on our YouTube channel. Let's go again. You guys have one more each.
So my last pick is Nicolo Fagioli, who went from Juventus to Fiorentina.
Next gen player?
Yeah. I think this is a bit of a painful one for Juventini because there was a lot of hope put on Fagioli, but I think the mixture of getting caught up in the betting suspension, he slowly came back last year in Max Allegri's, final season. Allegri was a big fan of Fagioli.
And Luciano Spalletti, because he called him up without him even... Did he even play a minute for Juventus on his comeback?
No.
And Tonali brought back in, so fair play to Spalletti,
Exactly. And then obviously Allegri left. Thiago Motta has come in. And he did play under Motta this season. He had 17 games for Juventus, but he's fallen further and further down the pecking order. Obviously, you have Catherine Thuram, is there, you have Manuel Locatelli, you have Coop Miners, you have Weston McKennie. There's a lot of midfielders for that double pivot in Motta's 4-2-3-1. So it seemed like a matter of time, and Juventus tried to sell other players. They couldn't make that happen. So Fagioli, in the end, was the sacrificial lamb to raise some capital.
Well, they needed it for Colomouani.
Yeah, exactly. And according to reports, Fagioli actually reached out to Allegri to advise him where to go because he was considering moving abroad.
Father figure.
Exactly. And Allegri
was linked with Marseille, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, And Allegri told him, stay in Italy and go to Fiorentina. And that's what he did.
Well, I mean, Moise Kean is...
Fabulous project.
Resurrected his career.
We've seen what he's done,
I mean, Fiorentina, I think they're a perfect... 4 players like Fagioli, they're the perfect club.
Some tremendous midfielders there as well. You got Mandragora with that look away ball over the top for Moise Kean. What a fabulous goal. If you haven't seen that, go to Serie A's Twitter and have a look at that, or Serie A's YouTube channel. That is a work of art. Let's just stop there. We don't want to go on too much about Juventus. They sold the player to Fiorentina. Good luck to Fagioli there. Dan, let's go with your last one.
Yeah, I mean, the last one is Daniel Maldini. Obviously comes from...
Figlio d'arte.
Yeah, it comes from like one of the probably the greatest Italian
son of an artist.
Yeah, they're sort of like
what a bloodline.
Family dynasty.
In Italian football, and he's played for the Nerazzurri.
That's the good bloodline that we like.
Yeah.
Getting away from the mafia stereotypes. That is a football pedigree and a bloodline that we love.
But as Emmet pointed out in his piece, luckily for his dad, the Nerazzurri in question are Atalanta, not Inter Milan.
Yeah.
I think it's an incredibly smart signing.
I think he'll really excel there.
It is. I agree. I mean, I think he's done really well this season. He's obviously got a call up for Italy earlier this season. And it's the kind of player which will... I mean, I think he'll benefit from playing under Gasperini.
Yeah. I mean, imagine playing next to CDK, a former Milan player that maybe didn't make his mark. I think Maldini was on the bench at the same time as CDK there.
Yeah.
CDK moved over. Gasp got the best out of him. Maldini now has that option. He started at Milan, on loan to Spezia, scored against Milan, on loan at Empoli after that. Then we've seen him at Monza a couple of seasons, got his Italian call-up. Here's his big chance.
Yeah, I think it's big chance. And as I said, I think Gasperini's got the knack for getting the best out of his players. And I think it'd be really helpful for Maldini because Gasper can mould players. If you go there and as a defensive midfielder, it will not be a surprise to see Gasperini turning you into like a box-to-box midfielder, or if you go there as a wing-back, you may end up playing on the winger after playing a couple of seasons under Gasperini because he's got this tactical flexibility about him, and he's a bit of a visionary, isn't he? Like,
he makes players into better players.
He does, exactly, yeah.
So once again, a reminder, guys, go and check out that piece from Emmet Gates on the 9 most eye-catching signings of Serie A in the January transfer window. To wrap up our top 5 here, well, our most notable 5, mine is Assandiao Como. Emmet?
João Felix to Milan and Nicolo Fagioli to Fiorentina.
And Santiago Jimenez to AC Milan and Daniel Maldini to Atalanta for me.
This is the Calcio FC podcast with me, David Ferrini, the Destination Calcio writers Emmet Gates and Dan Cancian. We're going to deep dive on Pisa, Serie B club that is aspiring for a return to Serie A for the first time since, 1991. They were last relegated in the Diego Simeone era. Henrik Larsen, the Danish Larsen, that is, that represented Denmark 39 times with a few goals. Guys, Filippo Inzaghi, what a job he is doing. He got Benevento promoted a few years back, and he's trying to do the same thing with Pisa. Let's go with Emmet. Who do you see as perhaps Inzaghi's most important players, the job that he's doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to the Inzaghi brothers, Pippo was the better footballer, but we've seen that Simone...
Oh, come on. Simone scored 4 in a game in the Champions League, didn't he? For Lazio back in the day.
Yeah, but I mean...
But yeah, on that one game,
when you're judging careers, Pippo did
just sticking up for you, Simone, in case you're watching.
Yeah. But I do think as a coach, Simone has demonstrated that he is better than Pippo. Yet, what Pippo was doing this season with Pisa, I think, is exceeding expectations. I think if you had asked the three of us at the beginning of the season... who do you see in the top 2 or top 3 positions? I don't think any of us would have nominated Pisa to be up there, especially at this point in the season. So he's doing a fantastic job, and he's got them playing decent football. They've goals from everywhere. And you've Nicolas Tramone, who's doing very well. Alexander Lind, I should say, not to be confused.
Not to be confused with Christopher Lund, which we've done an interview with him for that. Well, I'll plug that one right now. Dan and I went down to Sicily for that one. Go on.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, we're more than halfway through the season, and we are looking like Pisa could be back in the top flight for the first time in 34 years. And yeah, it's great what Pippo is doing in Pisa, and he's showing that Simone isn't just the only managerial great in the family.
Yeah. There's some other names there. Piccinini. We've also got Stefano Moreo, who's an unsung hero there. At the back, of course, it all starts at the back in Italian football, especially in Serie B, the most competitive league in the world that you can see live 3 games every week on DCTV. But look, they've also got Adrian Semper in goal. He's been remarkable. We've put a video out last week on some of the saves that he pulled off to get Pisa when they took the lead against Palermo. He's the one that got them the win, some fingertip saves at the end of the match. Dan, where do you see this going with Pippo and this kind of team of unsung heroes?
I mean, I think Inzaghi is really, as Emmet said, it's been a surprise. I wouldn't go as far as saying a revelation, but it's been a surprise. He took Benevento up, then things didn't quite work out for him in Serie A. So I guess the next question is that, if he takes Pisa up, is it going to work for him in Serie A? Because, there's a lot of managers, not just in Italy, but in England as well. They are fantastic at bringing a team up, winning promotion, but then things never seem quite to work out for them. But, as far as this season is concerned, like, he's been superb. They finished 13th last season. He comes in the summer and he's been, been really leaning, see what I've done here? Leaning into... Sorry, I had to get it.
We should mention that Pisa had a player called Torre Grossa as well.
Well, there you go.
It was
Big Tower.
the big tower,
so.
until last season. He's at Salernitana, by the way.
Anyway, sorry. I think the thing that has been by far the best achievement this season for Inzaghi is that he has devised a system really quickly. At the start of the season, it was all about, being a sort of, counter-attacking football, quick passing and getting the team up and running. And I think that that's put a lot of other teams on the back foot because they obviously thought they may see a different Pisa, being like a bit more defensive. And, they don't play sparkling football that the Swallows do. But as you said, they've got calls coming from everywhere. They've got the second best attack in the season in Serie B. And I think...
And the second best defense.
Second best defense, yeah. And I think to Inzaghi's credit, when other teams started figuring them out, they went through a blip like at the end of November, early December, and you thought, is this them done for the season? Have they been figured out? But, within a couple of games, he's turned things around again, and, they're up and running again. And I think that he deserves enormous credit for that.
Well, they're undefeated in 6 games.
They are, and I think, the structure behind Pisa is also very, I think it's crystal clear the teams that have a proper football structure behind them make such a difference in Serie B. We see it with the Swallow. We are seeing it with Pisa. They've got big plans of, going up again. And, I think Inzaghi is probably going to have faced big challenges if they go up in terms of players, potentially moving on. But they're well set.
Pisa really punching above their weight in the eyes of many. Emmet, the Arena Garibaldi, let's talk about that, where the Pisa home stadium. It's not the prettiest thing from outside, is it? But they're feeling it every week.
Yeah, it opened in 1919, and I don't think it's been touched or renovated since 1919. It is, by Italian standards, it's one of the biggest eyesores you will see in the whole peninsula.
And
yet
from the exterior,
from
inside
the outside,
it's quite nice.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's quite a big field to choose from when it comes to eyesores.
Exactly, but they are filling it. Every week they're getting probably 75 to 80% sellout, and they create a buzz, and that's how Pisa in their home form. But it will be interesting to see the amendments they have to make when they go up to Serie A, because obviously the regulations are a lot stricter in Serie A.
Yeah, as we've seen with Venezia, with Como, they've had to renovate their stadiums.
Yeah.
And, I should mention, actually, the plans going through in the Como Lago di Como municipality there, they put through plans, or at least an idea to renovate and redo that stadium. Back to Pisa.
Yeah, so obviously we've seen it this season with Como had to play several away matches in August and September to give the team more time to renovate the stadium to meet criteria. I do think you'll see the same at Pisa next year, because there will be a lot of work needed at the Garibaldi if Pisa go up. But it's an interesting stadium, David. That's what I will say. It's very interesting.
And sorry, Dan, you've got
something
to say.
No, I was going to say that, I think you're going to find this more and more, because we keep hearing about projects in Italian football. When we spoke last week about American investment and foreign investment into Serie A, where Pisa to come up, there will be another team owned by an American ownership.
Yeah,
and I think you'll find that these foreign investors aren't put off by the need to, if not necessarily build new grounds from the bottom up, to sort of renovate existing grounds. I think today, as I said, they see it as a project. They see it as a way of broadening sort of the access and the appeal of the football club, not just to the local community, but perhaps to, I would not necessarily tourists, but, perhaps people who are not necessarily in the Calcio sphere as of now. And, Como have done it. And Pisa is high up the list of tourist destination in Italy, I would assume.
Massively, because Tuscany is a great
Exactly.
region for
Yeah.
football, which we'll get to in a second. Just want to mention who the Pisa owner is. Alexander Nasta, worth a couple of billion compared to, according to Forbes. Moscow-born banker Alexander Nasta emigrated to the US with his parents in 1976 and became a US citizen. He returned to Russia in the mid-90s. There's loads of stuff on that Forbes piece there, but he is the owner of Pisa, and perhaps that's a big part of the reason why Pisa can push. We saw them nearly do it. They went out against Monza in the Serie B playoff final, which we'll be bringing you later in the season on the DCTV app. So Pisa nearly did it. The last time they were in Serie A, the Diego Simeone era and the Heinrich Larsson era, as we were talking about off air before, guys, the glory days may be coming back for Pisa. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the form that they're showing, obviously under Pippo this season, they're only a couple of points behind Sassuolo in the race for promotion, and I don't see Pisa falling away, to be honest. I think that they've stayed the course this far. I don't see them dropping off.
Let's hope that they can get back. Good luck to them. Tuscany is a football region down the road from Pisa. Is Carrara, which we've been to. If you haven't seen that, we went to Carrarese Cittadella, a 3-0 win for the home side. The really small stadium there, which I think we've got the stadium guide up on the website as well.
I think calling it a stadium is a bit generous.
The training ground, that for Serie C standards, they've just been promoted from Serie G.
You do feel like Tuscany need another team in Serie A, though, because we went from having the likes of Fiorentina,
Empoli,
Siena, Livorno.
Yeah.
I know we've only Fiorentina.
Yeah, actually, we should say the Pisa going up. I mean, the reaction in Livorno if Pisa went up. I can think of very few football rivalries as intense as that between Pisa and Livorno. It's like Celtic Rangers translated on like in Tuscany. I think they people in Livorno say that they would rather have a serious issue in the family than have someone from Pisa on their doorstep.
So make sure, if you want to visit Pisa, get there. Great place, Tuscany, footballing paradise, let's say. Let's hope that they get another team in Serie A. Go and watch all the Pisa highlights and full match replays on the DCTV app. That's it from me, David Ferrini, this week on Calcio FC, joined by Emmet Gates and Dan Cancian. Thanks for joining, guys, and a great trip to Milan. We're back and we're ready to write more things for you. You can contact us on our personal X accounts. I'm at David Ferrini _ at the end there. Emmet Gates.
I am at Emmet Gates.
Dan.
And I'm at Dan _ Cancian.
He is, and be sure to join us every Thursday on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify and YouTube for our next Calcio FC podcast. And don't forget, you can watch action as well as highlights on the tv.Destination Calcio website and the DCTV app. That's it from us. Remember, the destination is always Calcio.